So to follow up from the previous video, I had mentioned someone named Ryan Kribbe, who was quite clearly removed from this website here of Kellyanne Wolf's, which is the Canadian Democratic Defense Association. But this is a subsidiary called We Are the Change. So you can see Ryan Anderton's name is removed from the CDDA right here. And now to follow up with what this video is about. It is about friendship centers, which provide culturally relevant programs and services for First Nations people across Canada, having to do with health, shelter, youth, etc., justice, that kind of a thing. And I'll also be talking about different think tanks, the Biodigital Convergence, synthetic biology, and a few people. Phil Davis, his sister Dawn, who's the director of Niagara Regional Native Center, as well as Karl Dockstader. So within the history here, friendship centers began in the mid-50s as more quote-unquote indigenous people moved into urban areas. And I don't personally like using the word indigenous because UNDRIP, the United Nations Declarations for Rights of Indigenous Peoples, allots land and resource rights to quote-unquote indigenous people, but does not define what that means exactly. So therefore that can be skewed quite easily. And you get different like band councils, these friendship centers, and as well the quote-unquote fake native groups that I've spoken about in different videos, which I'll be leaving links for in the description, are all mutually in support of UNDRIP. So when people have the arguments of identity theft and people pretending to be of certain heritages that they are not, yeah, those things definitely need to be addressed, but it also serves as a bigger point of being a distraction and making people angry so that they can't actually get to the bottom of the actual issue going on. So you serves the purpose of distracting people and making them angry while taking them away from looking at the bigger picture of things like what UNDRIP actually does and different United Nations agendas and that sort of a thing. So it says that basically these agencies provide like employment, housing, education, health liaison, that kind of a thing. And as demand for services by urban migrating First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people increased, so did the number of friendship centers. And so in the late 60s, the friendship centers began to organize into provincial and territorial organizations. And there were a large number of growing friendship centers that gained popularity. And by 1972, the National Association of Friendship Centers was established to represent nationally the growing number of friendship centers and PTAs merging across Canada, and they evolved to be quote-unquote frontline delivery vehicles of social services. And by 1996, the administrative responsibility for the Aboriginal Friendship Center program was transferred from the Department of Canadian Heritage to the NAFC. And this new agreement meant that all operational funding for the AFCP would be administered by the NAFC directly to friendship centers and PTAs. And so this highlighted a new era of relations between First Nations people and the government of Canada. And it says here, most recently, friendship centers demonstrated a quote-unquote heroic collective response when the World Health Organization declared a quote-unquote outbreak and a you-know-what on March 11th, 2020. And they moved quickly to respond to support both urban, indigenous, and non-indigenous people, as said here. And there is a report to look at if you wish. So I can't say certain words because I want to keep this video on YouTube so people can read what's directly in front of them. So Jocelyn Formsma, which is the CEO of the National Association of Friendship Centers, is also a member of the World Economic Forum, alright, which I've addressed in different videos, and the only thing there about is bringing about the fourth industrial revolution and part of this biodigitalization agenda, which I will be talking about in this video. And like I said, I always leave links in the description for previous videos to watch in terms of subject matter that I address and references I make to other videos I've made. So she's a lawyer, member of the Indigenous Bar Association, and advisor to Ontario Indigenous Youth Partnership Project, and served as a board of trustee of the Canadian Museum of Human Rights, member of Moose Cree First Nation in Northern Ontario, and she resides in Ottawa, which is the area where Policy Horizons Canada is located. Policy Horizons was created by the Privy Council and is the figurehead leader of the Biodigital Convergence agenda within Canada. And the person that runs it, her name is Crystal van der Elst. She also happens to have international ties and has been part of the head of strategic foresight for the World Economic Forum herself, and as well has different relationships with organizations from the UN, World Health Organization, IMF, that kind of a thing. So, as well, here it says that, besides being called to the bar of Ontario and worked in a First Nations owned law firm, she was appointed the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance's Task Force on Women and the Economy, and is past chairperson of the Aboriginal People's Television Network, volunteered in community radio, was a board member of the National Indian Child Welfare Association. And so apparently her work in the Friendship Center and her quote-unquote justice work is supposed to have innovative, positive, and effective systemic change for Indigenous peoples. Like I said, I don't like using the word Indigenous, but the World Economic Forum does not give a damn about anyone, whether they are First Nations or not, and just want to bring about their fourth industrial revolution. And any time these sick people talk about open borders, they're really talking about the metaverse. They're not talking about merging countries or that kind of a thing. So some of the organizations that partner with the National Association of Friendship Centers, I'll get to in a second, but there's basically a volunteer executive committee and a volunteer board of directors, which comprises of 11 regional representatives. And so here they all are. If people want to, again, look at the link in the description. So two of the organizations that they partner with are New Journeys and Urban Aboriginal Knowledge Network. New Journeys, just very quickly, is just like an online mobile service organization on board with the Friendship Centers. It's just an online Friendship Center, really, is what it is. And then the Urban Aboriginal Knowledge Network operates as a network council, and the purpose of the network council is to determine strategic direction and priorities and advise on knowledge mobilization and stakeholder engagement, and access the network council's accomplishments and to contribute to fundraising. So essentially, here it says that the Network Council is the national governing body of the Urban Aboriginal Knowledge Network, co-chaired by the National Association of Friendship Centers and the Academic Principal Investigator, the Academic Principal Investigator, which is a grant from the SSHRC, the Social Studies Humanities Research Council. So I have encountered this specific think tank in prior videos in terms of research that I've done on something called the social economy, which is just the fancy way of saying Agenda 2030, really. And basically, I have questioned Maxime Bernier in relation to that as the communications director of the PPC. I'm not sure if she still is. Joanne Meny has actually worked for Policy Horizons, and as well, Maxime Bernier ended up submitting data reports and stuff to the Social Sciences Humanities Research Council at the time that he was Minister of Industry in Canada and also part of the Conservatives. Now he's part of the People's Party of Canada. So 5 essential structures that undertake planning of national level research projects, stakeholder engagement, research, knowledge transfer, and fundraising. 5 structures are the Network Council, Aboriginal Circle, Funders Table, Regional Research Centers Table, and the Secretariat. And in addition, the Network Council provides guidance to the Urban Aboriginal Knowledge Network as a whole. So, as we can see, Jocelyn Formsma of the World Economic Forum is also director of the National Association of Friendship Centers and is co-chair of this Urban Aboriginal Knowledge Network. And so the Funders Table provides an opportunity for organizations on departments that provide financial support to the network to participate in the network governance, priority setting, and ongoing activities. The Funders Table ensures that additional funds are appropriately instituted, provide input on research priorities, and work with the Network Council on financial matters of additional contracts brought in through the Funders Table. And it was established in conjunction with 3 other components of the Network Council, which is the Aboriginal Circle, Secretariat, and Regional Research Centers in early governance development. And the members are Aboriginal Affairs in Northern Development Canada and National Association of Friendship Centers. Aboriginal Affairs in Northern Development Canada has actually split into 2 different departments, if you will. So at first, I guess this is what it was renamed to, and it was dissolved and replaced by these 2 specific departments: Crown Indigenous Relations in Northern Affairs Canada and Indigenous Services Canada. And I believe the head of one of those particular organizations there is also a member of the World Economic Forum, Patty Hadju. And so I had mentioned Policy Horizons earlier, and so this is basically an article here. I'm not really going to read it, but I'll show aspects of a different one that show the 16 future global challenges under Imagining Canada's Future. So, next generation of emerging global challenges. This is an article from 2018 from Policy Horizons, and it says the objective of this project was to identify the next generation of global challenges for consideration by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council as part of its Imagining Canada's Future initiative. It says here climate change is a familiar global challenge. I'll be talking about that a little bit and what that actually means. While that problem is far from solved, we were focused on what else lies over the horizon. The challenges we explored have several shared characteristics, and there are emerging problems with the potential to shape society in profound ways. Publicly funded research could help inform public dialogue and policy development, and each challenge is multidisciplinary and requires broad cooperation to solve. Many emerge from technological innovations, and as current headlines attest, those challenges are perhaps in greatest need of attention from social science and humanities researchers. The point at which each challenge may become pressing varies, but all of the challenge themes would benefit from proactive transdisciplinary exploration and discussion. So, the 16 emerging global challenges, I'll just show visual aid here as it's a little easier to look at. So you have working in the digital economy, global health and wellness for the 21st century, the emerging asocial society, building better lives across the gender spectrum, humanity plus, the evolving bioage, the pervasive contamination of the natural, envisioning governance systems that work, the arts transform, the changing nature of security and conflict. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely more than I read there. However, all of these things have some sort of little correlation to each other, and people can look at them individually themselves if you want, or even just download this image here that shows them all cross-connecting, if you will. But I'm only going to read select parts of this article because, in particular, I'll just be here way too long if I'm doing that, frankly. So, it says here that digital technologies are creating a global digital infrastructure if you will. And so the way working in the next digital economy is going to work here, it mentions emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, data analytics, sensors, which I'll primarily be talking about, blockchain, which is key in their ingredients for this to work, robotics, telepresence, as telecommunications is heavily involved in this, and actually Maxime Bernier has worked in telecommunications as well. 3D printing and synthetic biology, which we will cover, are creating a global digital infrastructure that will transform the economy and the nature of work. And over the next decade, many jobs, industries, and communities are expected to face disruption. Firms may become more virtual. There may be fewer traditional jobs and more virtual gig work. Some people may become surplus to requirements, and the structural changes could have implications for macroeconomic theory and policy. The digital transition could have widespread positive and negative effects. I'm just simply going to go with negative effects. So for me to simplify this here, they call this not only the next digital economy, but they also call it the task-based economy or gig economy, if you will. So they basically want a world where we are competing with each other for different tasks, and if you combine CRISPR with the blockchain, CRISPR being DNA altering technology, and you take NFTs, non-fungible tokens, which are basically pictures on the blockchain that hold certain data, imagine that picture on the blockchain being a DNA strand, and that DNA strand gets loaded with tokens when people complete different tasks, and you could also factor carbon credits in there as we're talking about this climate change thing here. So what ends up happening is you basically get rewarded these tokens or credits or digital assets that get loaded onto a DNA strand on the blockchain, and we're all competing for tasks and stuff at that point. So this is basically beyond a dog eat dog world that these people would want to create, essentially. So digitization of global value chains, new technologies are creating a global digital infrastructure and digital platforms that use AI to match demand and supply. Platforms like freelancer.com allow anyone, anywhere to find qualified virtual workers online. Amazon is providing the infrastructure that links producers and consumers, and devices like Alexa and Google Home automate the process. Uber and many others are automating services like transportation and delivery and self-driving vehicles that will take this a step further. And as the digital infrastructure evolves, service industries are becoming global. Manufacturing could become more local. 3D printing and natural resources could be produced locally. Synthetic biology, which I'll be talking about that a little bit, and then I'll also be going over an article called Indigenous Perspectives on Biodigital Convergence. And so just a little side note, just a thought that came to mind is I've noticed that a lot more meetings tend to happen through Zoom and stuff like that in particular, and also even job interviews and stuff like that tend to be online far more often than not. So synthetic biology explained is a new interdisciplinary area that involves the application of engineering principles to biology. It aims at the redesign and fabrication of biological components and systems that do not already exist in the natural world. Synthetic biology combines chemical synthesis of DNA with growing knowledge of genomes to enable researchers to quickly manufacture catalog DNA sequences and assemble them into new genomes. Improvements in the speed and cost of DNA synthesis are enabling scientists to design and synthesize modified bacterial chromosomes that can be used in the production of advanced biofuels, bioproducts, renewable chemicals, bio-based specialty chemicals such as pharmaceutical intermediates, fine chemicals, food ingredients, and in the healthcare sector as well. So imagine being able to print off different forms of like DARPA hydrogel of sorts, or even quote-unquote medical products to meat and food, stuff like that. Like, this is just like an abomination, really. And systems biology studies complex natural biological systems as integrated wholes using tools of modeling, simulation, and comparison to experiment. And synthetic biology studies how to build artificial biological systems using many of the same tools and experimental techniques. The focus is often on taking parts of natural biological systems, characterizing and simplifying them, and using them as components of an engineered biological system. Genetic engineering usually involves the transfer of individual genes from one microbe or cell to another, and synthetic biology envisions the assembly of novel microbial genomes from a set of standardized genetic parts that are then inserted into a microbe or cell. And now to take this a step further, the things that actually enable things like this to occur are the standardization organizations, which we'll get to a little bit. We'll be talking about the IEEE in particular, but there's like the International Standardization Organization, the Institute of the Electrotechnical Commission, I think. The International Electrotechnical Commission. There we go, excuse me. So, here it says, industrial biotechnology provides tools to enhance natural mechanisms of biological processes to efficiently produce enzymes, chemicals, polymers, or even products such as vitamins and fuel. And scientists have studied the genomes of microbes to identify biological processes that can replace chemical reactions to make new products, cleaner manufacturing operations, and reduce the number of production steps. And it says, for example, by harnessing the natural power of enzymes or whole cell systems and using sugars as the feedstock. For product manufacturing, industrial biotech companies can work with nature to help us move from a petroleum-based economy to a quote-unquote bio-based economy. And industrial biotechnology innovations are now successfully competing with and replacing traditional petrochemical manufacturing process. And companies that adopt industrial biotechnology find they can cut costs, reduce pollution and their quote-unquote carbon footprint, and increasing profitability. So there we go again with the climate change BS. So this right here is Suzanne Brant. Like I said, she is one of the authors of the article, which I'll be going a little bit over, called Indigenous Perspectives on Biodigital Convergence. I already spoke about her in a prior video. She also, just like Crystal Vander Elst of Policy Horizons, is as well part of the Rotary Club, if you will. So, the Haudenosaunee peoples, formerly called Iroquois, or people of the Longhouse, are the confederacy of 6 First Nations: Mohawk, Cayuga, Oneida, Onondaga, Seneca, and Tuscarora, which I think was added later, united by a common goal to live in harmony. Contemporary Haudenosaunee communities can be found in upstate New York, Quebec, Ontario, Wisconsin, and Oklahoma. And as well, the Haudenosaunee worldview does not figure objects or individuals as static. For example, a wooden table is in a constant state of flux or transformation. It's composed of its interactions as it had life as a tree in the forest, wood in the workshop, and is used for eating or other purposes for insects, fungi, or literally just becomes like your wooden table, right? So, and then in particular here, talking about the Great Law of Peace, which I will get to momentarily, it says Mamaday's words evoke the Haudenosaunee principles of the good mind, which is derived from the Great Law of Peace. And the good mind occurs when people put their minds and emotions in harmony with the flow of the universe. The good mind confers the ability to make a sound judgment for the welfare of broader Haudenosaunee society. Connect good mind to land. To the Haudenosaunee, the good mind and land are inseparable, for neither is possible without the other. And where one is has everything to do with who one is. So what we take from all this is that the full expression of our humanity is only possible through intimate connection to each other, to territory, and the various natural cycles shaping existence. And in 2020, the Policy Horizons article Exploring Biodigital Convergence identifies an important policy question: could traditional resource-based competitive advantages fade? And suggests that decentralized food production through synthetic biology, which I was just talking about, could lead to the ability to create food and engineer meat without the need for arable land. So basically what they're saying is to preserve the land instead of using the resources, which certain natives might call relatives. You're talking about just using 3D printing instead, which is just perverse and ridiculous. They just basically perverted the great law of peace, essentially, to sell you on the biodigital convergence, is what they're really doing. So that's that, and now I'm going to talk a little bit about this guy, Karl Dockstader, who's part of this thing called Plenty Canada. And this is Karl Dockstader over here. I'll read a little bit about his background and him being moved as an advisor here. It says, from its Six Nations Bureau office, Plenty Canada is pleased to announce the hiring of Karl Dockstader as an advisor for Indigenous content, culture, and protocol. Karl, who is well known in the Niagara region, brings to the position a wealth of knowledge and experience in Indigenous organizational management, visual and media arts, and cultural protocol and practice. His involvement will strengthen an already capable and successful team while extending outreach and engagement. Tim Johnson of Plenty Canada, the senior advisor, is pleased to have Karl on board. And in this organization, we also consider functionality and positive personality traits as being essential qualifications. And Karl's palpable love of his family, community, and Bear Clan Oneida culture, along with his inquisitive nature and voracious quest for learning, make him a true value add for our team, supposedly. Self-described Friendship Center baby, Karl had the honor of serving as executive director of the Niagara Regional Native Center, which followed by years of frontline community work with Fort Erie Native Friendship Center. And he's an advocate and activist for grassroots initiatives. If you say so, grassroots, that word is used quite loosely, and is unafraid to take bold stances on matters that affect Indigenous peoples, and has used art and communication, including podcasting, to support community achievement goals. If you say so, I'm not overly familiar with his podcast, but I do know a little bit about his background. So the radio program is called One Dish, One Mic, just like the treaty, One Dish, One Spoon, that airs in Niagara, London, Windsor, and Hamilton. And he's also Bell Media Radio News rotating talk shows on 610 CKTB's The Drive, airing weekdays from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. And he has done TV work on the CTV News channel, been on the politics show CTV Power Play from the 2021-2022 season, and done a variety of freelance work with CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, which I like to call the Communist Broadcasting Corporation. And Karl Dockstader is an outstanding communicator and leader, said Walter Sendzik, who is the former mayor of the city of St. Catharines, and basically has been described as a leading voice on Indigenous issues in Canada. And Karl is apparently a knowledge keeper and community builder, as described here. And in his advisory capacity, he will produce and host Plenty Canada webinars that focus on a range of Indigenous issues spanning culture, language, and current events. The matters of environment, including the existential crisis that they call climate change, which I will eventually be addressing in this video. And so, yeah, let's move forward here. So, just want to talk a little bit about CTV News and just say that its parent corporation is BCE, which I think stands for, let me see, what does that stand for again? Bell Canada Enterprises. And so, interestingly enough, then when you look at its shareholders, BCE, you see the Royal Bank of Canada. You also end up seeing the Bank of Montreal, and you also see CIBC World Markets, National Bank of Canada, Vanguard, of course, because pretty much everything here on Yahoo Finance is owned by BlackRock, Vanguard, or State Street. And if you don't see any of their names or you see other names, guarantee the other names are owned by either BlackRock, Vanguard, or State Street. And as well, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street all have shares within each other's companies there. So, and then of course you have Deutsche Bank here as well, which is interesting. So, Plenty Canada is a registered non-profit charitable organization that facilitates access to and shares resources with Indigenous peoples and other community groups around the world in support of their environmental protection and sustainable development goals. There you have it. So, various partnering organizations of Plenty Canada include things such as UNESCO, which is the Canadian Commission for UNESCO, part of the UN, if you will, and as well you have, now I'm going to talk about Phil Davis, as he has ties to UNESCO as well. It says 58-year-old man of Haudenosaunee descent. He's probably a little bit older since this article has been written, and was raised in the Niagara region and has been an active member in the local friendship center and since childhood, and has many years of volunteering, board membership, and employee through the center with the dream of furthering growth towards economic self-sustainability, and has garnered some lasting partnerships and friendships in all sectors of society. And he continues to be a volunteer counselor with Indigenous Justice Diversion Program and sit on that advisory council, as well as with the Justice Sharing Table group that oversees the challenges and complexities associated with the Indigenous Peoples Court, and brainstorm with justice frontline workers from Aboriginal Legal Services, presiding justices, crown attorneys, Minister of Attorney General Administration staff, Police Association, Law Society, John Howard Society, and Traditional Knowledge Keepers. And for 4 years he was involved in the developing of having Niagara region designated as a UNESCO geopark. I'm going to talk about what that means exactly, and I'm not sure if the Niagara region is still considered a geopark or not. So, in particular, it says that UNESCO global geoparks are single unified geographical areas where sites and landscapes of international geological significance are managed with a holistic concept of protection, education, and sustainable development. Their bottom-up approach of combining conservation with sustainable development while involving local communities is becoming increasingly popular. At present, there are 195 global geoparks in 48 countries, and it also says here that basically they are there to promote sustainable development and mitigate the effects of what they call climate change here. Once again, more BS to throw at us and more distractions to keep us from looking at the bigger picture, like the Internet of X things and that sort of a thing, which I will be getting to. And it mentions that there are 3 types of UNESCO site designations. So there are global geoparks, biosphere reserves, and World Heritage Sites. And together they give a complete picture of celebrating heritage while at the same time conserving the world's cultural, biological, and geological diversity while promoting sustainable economic development. So while biosphere reserves focus on harmonized management of biological and cultural diversity, and World Heritage Sites promote the conservation and natural and cultural sites of outstanding universal value, UNESCO Global Geoparks give international recognition for sites that promote the importance and significance of protecting the Earth's geodiversity through actively engaging with the local communities. And when an aspiring UNESCO Global Geopark includes a World Heritage Site or Biosphere Reserve, a clear justification and evidence has to be provided on how UNESCO Global Geopark status will add value by being both independently branded and in synergy with the other designations. So, now to read page 4 of this World Economic Forum article here. I said I was going to go over something in the World Economic Forum. So this particular article is titled Navigating the Industrial Metaverse, a Blueprint for Future Innovations, and I'm going to read page 4 when I'm able to scroll down to it. So here, 4. So here's a summary. The industrial metaverse, projected to be a $100 billion market globally by 2030, is spearheading operational change by seamlessly incorporating transformative technologies across industrial value chains. The innovation promises participants a blended reality where the physical world becomes unconstrained through its digital counterparts, which offer agility, adaptability, and real-time interactivity. So essentially smart cities, or 15-minute cities as the quote-unquote freedom movement likes to popularize, those are really just stepping stones toward a metaverse environment, if you will. So this report emphasizes how the metaverse will propel the next phase of the industrial revolution through the convergence of digital twins, the core building block of the industrial metaverse, and 3 rapidly evolving fields: spatial computing, artificial intelligence, and Web3 and blockchain. It outlines opportunities for leaders, explores how various industries are using these technologies to unlock value, and discuss the foundational elements for collaborative, responsible, and economically sustainable next era of the internet. The aim is to assist stakeholders in navigating the complexities and realizing the transformative opportunities of the industrial metaverse. So, Metaverse is poised to supercharge the upcoming phase of the industrial revolution, right? So this is the merging of the digital and physical, and it says embracing innovation to withstand a myriad of disruptions. So leaders are doubling down on innovation to fortify themselves against disruption stemming from technological shifts, changing consumer preferences, and climate change. There we go. So in order to mitigate climate change, if you will, you've got to build the metaverse, if you will, to keep the physical and digital intact or something or other. And this is also done through various sensors and twinning, which I'll talk about eventually getting to the Internet of X things. The industrial metaverse impacts the entire value chain, driving productivity and growth, opening avenues for diverse revenue streams, solving real-world problems digitally, and driving greater efficiency. So this report explores its impact through a set of themes that showcase significant departures from current approach to design and engineering, collaboration, manufacturing, and operations, facilitating superior decision making. And so, of course, the report analyzed over 600 spatial experiences and Web3 initiatives. And digital twins are a core building block, essentially actively simulating real-world objects, and in combination with AI and quantum computing, these technologies will be crucial for processing the world in more intricate ways, if you will, or rather creating a new perverse world for these people, if you will, where we're living in a task-rabbit society competing for tasks within this metaverse, where you have a digitalized piece of DNA hanging on the blockchain with digital assets or tokens that will be loaded onto it provided you are able to find a task and complete it. So this is the buildup of a social credit score, essentially. And so with this being said, in terms of creating the global geopark through UNESCO that Phil Davis was involved with. Even if this technology is stuff that goes over Phil's head and he's not aware, he's essentially created the stepping stone for stuff like this at the very least, whether he is aware of it or not. So I would suggest to Phil, Karl, and also Don, and anybody else, and even the bloody head of the National Association of Friendship Centers, to watch this video themselves to understand the full picture of what it is they're actually involved with. And this here is the IEEE, if you will, which is one of the standardization organizations involved in bringing this kind of a thing to fruition, if you will. And so this little article is called Around the World of Internet of Things, Climate Monitoring, and Using Internet of X Things. So with the onset of climate change, climate monitoring represents one of the biggest challenges facing the world today. Global climate change directly impacts economic, environmental, and societal aspects such as safety, food security, and energy. And then it mentions various deaths that are contributed to climate change according to the United Nations Development Program. And in this context, it's not a surprise that climate action was added to the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 Sustainable Development Goals. People can look them up if they want, but those are kind of like the mandates which these corporations and organizations follow in order to complete their objectives, including these standardization organizations. And it all comes through the UN there, those Sustainable Development Goals. So thus predicting the magnitude of future impacts is of paramount importance. Many variables such as global climate, such as ocean salinity, ocean CO2 emissions, land dynamics, cloud properties, atmospheric temperature, and lightning. Therefore, monitoring these variables is vital to understand changes in the global environment. Information communication technologies are beneficial in monitoring these climate variables, and in this regard, the World Meteorological Organization and International Telecommunication Union outline the potential of information communication technologies for climate monitoring. At present, ICTs such as sensing instruments on satellites, sensors in oceans, and weather radars are the primary sources that provide climate change information, and several studies show that the use of the Internet of Things, including Internet of Underwater Things, Internet of Underground Things, Internet of Space Things, can be of great benefit in studying these critical climate change variables. For simplicity here, we use the framework of the Internet of X Things that combines information from all these different types of Internet of Things networks. So basically what this all comes down to is climate change is the excuse for having these sensors in various parts of the environment in order to twin those aspects of the environment for the metaverse, is what that really comes down to. So anything from oceans, underground, and what they call space, if you will. So yeah, they just want to twin absolutely everything for the metaverse to blur the lines of the physical and the digital for people. And then to preserve the land, if you will, this is where they talk about 3D bioprinting, which was basically in that article, Indigenous Perspectives on Biodigital Convergence. So in terms of combining all this sensing information can constitute a revolutionary advancement in climate monitoring, yet it is a challenging task because of issues with the communication between networks and data analysis of such a large amount of data, and so on and so forth. So the formula is essentially problem, reaction, solution, and the problem doesn't always have to be a real one. It can be an artificial one. So you take climate change as the problem, and then the reaction is fear and anger and the need to intervene in something. And so then the quote-unquote solution is twinning through the Internet of X Things using these sensors and sensor technology, if you will. And so the IEEE, if you will, which I can't remember what the acronym stands for offhand, my apologies, is the world's largest technical professional organization dedicated to advancing technology for the benefit of humanity. If you say so, and its members inspire a global community through its highly cited publications, conferences, technology standards, and professional and educational services. Right, if you say so. So here in the center is Dawn, which is Phil Davis's sister. It says, with the support of a Brock, as in Brock University, Indigenous Research Grant for a project entitled Indigenous Affordable Housing in Niagara, Joanne Harritz and Liam in the Department of Political Science have been working with community leaders Mary Ellen Simon, which is the Housing Programs Director, and Don Moughtin who's the Executive Director of the Niagara Regional Native Center, and Wendy Sturgeon, the Executive Director of the Niagara Chapter of Native Women. And then the grant aims to help researchers develop their research programs and creative activities so they can apply to external granting agencies such as the Social Sciences Humanities Research Council, National Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada, and the Canadian Institutes of Health Research for funding, among others. Let's talk a little bit about the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, but then now we've come across the SSHRC once again, so you can see that sort of how things go in circle and are interconnected. So the SSHRC is involved in this grant, if you will, as well as involved in the Biodigital Convergence agenda and working with policy horizons. And so this particular organization, the Kennequi School Diabetes Prevention Program, they submitted a quote-unquote rapid response grant. They submitted a rapid response grant in 2021 to the Canadian Institute of Health Research, if you will. And so this was the organization that I had just mentioned in particular. So interesting to see that cross connection. And one of the team members here, of course, happens to be Dawn, there we go, Dawn, Acting Executive Director of NRNC. So she's involved in this particular thing as well. And yeah, so that would essentially conclude the presentation here. But now, for solutions, we have to protect our natural springs and water supplies, and as well we have to form ethics committees in order to remove any piece of smart infrastructure, because the smart infrastructure is what leads toward a metaverse environment, and perhaps even getting rid of a lot of those sensors, if you will, because they want to twin everything down to a blade of grass, to people, to trees, etc., in order to create a mirrored digital environment that is blended with the physical, and therefore, really, these people play God, for lack of a better word, or pretend to be the creator and blur the lines of what it means to really be human and even spiritual. So if you don't want these things to come to fruition, we need to form ethics committees, whether including First Nations and non-First Nations people together, because this affects all of us as a whole, and we have to protect our water supplies and protect and respect the land in and of itself, and not in the same respect as using 3D bioprinting to preserve quote-unquote resources on the land, because the trees and plants and spices and stuff like that are not resources, they are relatives. Anyway, Thanks for watching, everybody. Feel free to ask questions if you want publicly and or message me directly on Facebook at Matt Unseated. So once again, thanks for watching and chi miigwech.